And that one thing that I want to talk about right now is the fact that apparently Texas, which is one of the states that has some of the strictest abortion laws, really did not want to actually show what the end result of those abortion laws were. But don't worry, they don't have to, because ProPublica stepped in and did it for them. Since Texas banned abortion in its state, no one has studied the statewide effects on pregnant women experiencing complications. So we sifted through the data on millions of pregnancy hospitalizations and analyzed the outcomes before and after the ban. Yay! I'm so excited to go through this, let me tell you. So, the article goes on to say that a first-of-its-kind analysis by ProPublica found that the sepsis rate in second trimester pregnancy lost hospitalizations increased by what? It's the fuck is that number? By more than 50% after Texas's near-total abortion ban went into effect. Ah, yes, we're so pro-life, we hope our women die of sepsis. The analysis also identified at least 120 in-hospital deaths of pregnant women postpartum in 2022 and 2023, which is an increase of dozens of deaths from a comparable period before the COVID pandemic. So, let me get this straight. There is an at least 30% increase in deaths in women in Texas who are pregnant after these bans were put into place. God, isn't that so funny? I think that's just hilarious. I think that's so funny. I get a chuckle out of that. You know why I get a chuckle out of that? Because I have morbid, fucked up humor. But the real reason I get a chuckle out of that is the pro-life party is going to stand on this and say that they've had a smashing success, which shows that it's never, ever, ever been about being pro-life for the actual Republican lawmakers. It's always been about control of women's bodies. Now, I'm sure that there are some well-meaning voters who have been duped into believing that they are pro-life themselves. I'm fairly certain that that's something that they really, truly, honestly want to pretend that they believe. The fact of the matter is that's not what the actual end result of any of this is. You've been duped. You've been had. If you're actually pro-life, if you actually care about the lives of people who matter, then maybe you should be pro-abortion, because that is the thing that is actually saving these women's lives. I'm sorry, you are not a reasonable person for taking the other position. Neither the CDC nor states are investigating the deaths. Well, of course, the CDC's not right now. That entire thing's getting gutted. Severe maternal complications related to abortion bans are not being researched either. And although the federal government and many states track severe complications in birth events using federally established methodology, far less is known about the complications that arise during a pregnancy loss. There is no federal methodology for doing this, so we consulted the experts to craft one. There's no methodology for this because they don't care. They never did. It was all a fucking smokescreen. They said, or ProPublica says, we acquired Texas hospitalization data from 2017 through 2023, giving us more than 2 years of data after the implementation of the state's 6-week abortion ban in September 2021, and more than a year of data following its full abortion ban, which went into effect August of 2022. We spoke with dozens of researchers and clinicians to adapt the federal algorithm for birth complications to focus on severe complications in early pregnancy before fetal viability. This methodology lays out the steps we took to complete this analysis to help experts and interested readers understand our approach and its limitations. Identifying second trimester hospitalizations. We purchased 7 years of inpatient discharge records for all hospitals from the Texas Department of State Health Services. These records contained de-identified data for all hospital stays longer than a day, with information about the stay, including diagnoses recorded and procedures performed during the stay, as well as some patient demographic information and billing data. Within this dataset, we opted to focus on second trimester pregnancy loss because first trimester miscarriage management often occurs in an outpatient setting. In the future, we plan on looking on that data as well. To examine the outcomes in the second trimester, we first identified hospitalizations where a pregnancy ended. We used a methodology to identify severe complications in birth events developed by the Health Resources and Services Administration, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Agency for Healthcare Research, an initiative of the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. This method is outlined in statistical codes published by the HRSA, and it first identifies every hospitalization with a live birth, stillbirth, or an abortive outcome, which refers to an intended or unintended pregnancy loss before 20 weeks. Rather than excluding those abortive outcomes to focus on birth, as the HRSA code directs, we included them to look at all hospitalizations where a pregnancy ended. This narrowed our list of hospitalizations to an average of 3,700 per year. Okay, so they're trying to narrow their data so they don't grab anything that is outside of their scope. This is just how you do good research in the first place. This all makes sense so far. For each hospitalization, the HRSA methodology further filters hospitalizations to only patients who are female and between the ages of 12 and 54. Our dataset had 5-year age ranges, so we filtered to ages between 10 and 54. This brought our hospitalization list to 3,600 each year on average. For each hospitalization where a pregnancy ended, we looked for a diagnosis code recording the gestational age of the fetus. In cases where the long hospitalization had multiple gestational week codes recorded over the course of the stay, we took the latest one. We excluded pregnancy and hospitalizations without a gestational week code for our analysis, which removed about 49,500 hospitalizations from the dataset. More than 2/3 had coding that indicated birth likely to have occurred after 20 weeks. Based on conversations with doctors and research, we narrowed our focus to hospitalizations where a pregnancy ended in the second trimester before fetal viability. So basically, we can skip ahead through a lot of this. If you're very interested in the methodology that was used here, then please go to the ProPublica article that they created themselves. Here's a link to it here. But I want to go ahead and see what their findings were. So let's go ahead and see here. Within these hospitalizations, we looked for diagnoses of sepsis, a life-threatening complication that can follow delays in emptying the uterus. Let's see here. To compare rates before and after the implementation of Senate Bill 8, we grouped 9 quarters of data, which we had after the implementation of the ban, and compared it with the 9 quarters immediately before. Our dataset gives us the quarter in which a patient was discharged from the hospital, but not the exact date. So the before group contains 1 month of data from after SB 8 went into effect. Okay, cool. The standard of care for this is for identifying fetal demise. The standard of care for second trimester miscarriage or rupture of membranes prior to fetal viability is to offer patients a dilation and evacuation or an induction to end the pregnancy, even if there is still a fetal heartbeat. In our reporting, we'd heard that because of the language of Texas's abortion law, some hospitals and doctors were waiting for the fetal heartbeat to stop or the mother to develop a life-threatening illness. Okay, cool. So that's fucking astounding to me. So the reason that they've done that, the reason that doctors have had to do this, for those in the audience who may not know, is the way the law is written right now. If a doctor ends the pregnancy of a woman where the fetus has a heartbeat of any variety whatsoever, then that is considered to be an abortion. Regardless of whether that fetus is actually viable, that can be a brain-dead tumor, but as long as there is a thump, 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 thump rhythm in whatever formative artery is trying to pump something resembling a red blood cell, then that is enough of a reason to hold that doctor negatively accountable. Which means That doctor can be sued, that doctor can lose their job, and the mother can get in legal trouble as well. This is all shit that was talked about in hypotheticals as if it could never happen, like 5 years ago. And yet it's been just happening now. Anyway, so they've had to wait until there's no heartbeat so that they don't get fucked over. Sepsis rate findings. Our analysis found that the sepsis rate in second trimester pregnancy loss hospitalizations increased after the state's ban went into effect, and the surge was most pronounced in cases where the fetus may still have a heartbeat when the patient arrived at the hospital. In the 9 quartets before the SB 8 went into effect, the sepsis rate in second trimester pregnancy loss hospitalizations was 2.9%. In the 9 quarters afterwards, it was 4.5%, which is an increase of 55%, which is fucking terrifying. Davenia says religion, that's the main root of the problem. No, it's not. I'm sorry, but it's not. Because you can find just as many politicians who fight for women's rights using religion as their argument as you can find politicians who are fighting against women's rights, again, using religion as their argument. The atheist community has been trying to fight for years, saying that it is just religion that is the root of the problem. I don't think it is. You're going to find these shitty people doing these shitty things, and they are going to use anything as the thing to hide behind, regardless. I wouldn't say the Bible's the cause. I would say it is the convenient scapegoat. Milk Boy, thank you for the follow. So the issue that I would say, if you want to point to anything religious-wise, would be Dogma. I would 100% say it is Dogma. It is groups of Christians who are so... they believe themselves to be so adherent to their faith that they cannot see reality for what it is. It is people who listen to a preacher on a pulpit tell them that this is a good thing without using an ounce of critical thinking. Davenia says, don't they usually use the Bible as proof of their view? Yeah, they hide behind it. They 100% hide behind it. But then how do you account for the Christians who are using the Bible as an excuse to fight for women's rights? To fight for secular rights, to fight for separation of church and state. Ultimately, it's just a tool. It's a tool that's being used for ill. Like, an atheist perspective on the Bible, for me, now, is it is a tool that gets abused. Very, very hard. The issue is people being dogmatic about it, pretending that everybody else has to actually utilize their frame of reference, their frame of mind, their religion. Everybody else has to use that. It's proselytization, it's dogmatism. Those are the issues at hand to me. It's people who are saying that everybody else needs to live like them. Now, an argument could be made that that is an aspect of the Bible and therefore an aspect of religion, but again, this is ignoring the amount of people who are religious of various types of cloth who do not fall into these categories. Likewise, you can flip that argument on atheists just as well, because you can lump people like atheism is unstoppable and use them as an argument against atheists if you so choose. If we are willing to use these sweeping brushes. Once upon a time, I was infinitely more comfortable using these kinds of sweeping brushes. I do not think that they are as applicable now, especially as I have gotten to know more and more people not on the goddamn internet. Orla says, God knows there's enough heathens that do it. You legitimately even get extremist Buddhists who have unalive people. Yep, you're going to find people on every side of that cloth that are issues. And you're going to find people on every side of that cloth that are going to use their religious text to defend what they are doing for ill and for good. Smacko says, I wouldn't say Trump is an atheist. I probably would. He is I would think that he is an atheist that is willing to use religion as a cudgel. He is using it as a tool. The problem that I've had personally is that a lot of people in the atheist community, and at one point myself included, were deluded into thinking that the solution to all of this was just to deconvert the world away from religion, and that would solve all the problems. But deconverting the world away from religion only makes people find something else to fill that void so that they can be just as evil. Anyway, going back to the article, it said, since our total numbers of sepsis cases were relatively small, we measured whether the two groups of data were significantly different using a t-test. We calculated sepsis rates for second trimester hospitalizations in the 9 quarters after SB 9 went into effect and compared that with sepsis rates during the 9 quarters immediately prior. We found the increases to be statistically significant. Now, what does that mean? So you can find fluctuations in data sets. That is normal. But for something to be statistically significant means it is something that is of note. Why does this matter? Let's take COVID for an example. We do know that the COVID vaccine has a rate of harm that it can cause. Yes, there is a rate of harm that can be caused, as there is a rate of harm with every vaccine. But when we say the COVID vaccine is safe, we are referring to the statistic significance of the rate of harm. If the rate of harm is under a certain allowable threshold, in the case of vaccines, it's usually within a fraction of 1%, a small fraction of 1%. So, like, if you have 100,000 people treated and, 25 people get hurt, that's 0.0025 effectively, that would be considered not statistically significant. That would be considered something that should be noted so that you can figure out if it was an allergy that was the issue or what have you when you're looking at measuring the harm that was caused by the vaccine. But it is not statistically significant. It is not significant enough to say this thing is not actually safe for literally, quite definitionally, 99.99% of the human populace. If, after analyzing data, you find that there is a statistically significant spread of whatever data point you're analyzing, or a statistically significant difference, that is the moment when you have to raise red alarms. You don't raise red alarms about a vaccine that's only having negative effects for 0.0001% of the population. But you do raise those red alarms if you see that something is happening to 55%, if there's a 55% increase over a previously experienced issue. Davinia says, sepsis is not a great way to die. I saw my mom die of it in agony for hours. I have not died from it, obviously. I am alive and well. However, there was a point in time where I needed to have steroids to avoid my body going into sepsis. And it was a time where I had a strain of flu that a family member of mine had around the same time. They went into the hospital a couple days after I did, and by then their body had gone into sepsis and they couldn't be saved. They had a wife, they had kids, and they were within a year of my age, and they were gone. So while I have not had sepsis, I have seen the end results of this, and I have had a scare of this variety myself. Finding out, oh shit, if I hadn't been pumped literally full of steroids, this would have been my fate. So this shit does mean something to me. Sepsis is a reaction to an infection. The most common additional infection diagnosis in sepsis hospitalizations was chorioamniotis, an infection of the amniotic fluid that could also cause early rupture of membranes. Rates of correlatic amnionitis, there we go, in sepsis cases remain stable after SB8. Our analysis showed that patients admitted while their fetus was still believed to have a heartbeat were far more likely to contract sepsis. So when somebody says ever that the abortion bans had no negative effect on any women, this is your point. This is your point of proof. You first, and this is where we get to the actionable part of the video, if you are meaning to change that person's mind, ask them what evidence would change your mind. And once they are willing to admit that if you can give them data that shows that they are wrong, they will change their mind, go, okay. So you admit, if I show you data that shows that there is a statistically significant negative change towards women because of these heartbeat bills, because of these abortion bans, you will admit you are wrong, and you will admit that there is at the very least a further conversation to be had. And at the moment they say okay, you whip this out. There are two methods for changing a person's mind. Both methods have to be approached while recognizing that you, as an individual human being, cannot change another person's mind. However, if your goal is to change their mind, your two options are the Socratic method and presentation of data. Your primary method is the Socratic method, because oftentimes we don't know why we believe the things we do. But if you are in a conversation where somebody is willing to analyze data and have their opinion changed based on that data, which unfortunately I have to promise you is actually a very low amount of conversations. Most of the time people have their mind changed because of emotion, not because of data. But if you are in one of those lucky situations where somebody will change their mind because of data, then this is your golden opportunity to show them that there was a 55% increase in sepsis rates as a direct cause that was directly caused by these laws, by the end results of these laws. Sepsis rates spiked for patients whose initial diagnosis didn't include fetal death. For patients in Texas hospitals who lost a pregnancy, about half were not diagnosed with fetal demise when they were admitted, meaning that their fetus may still have had a heartbeat at that time. These patients saw a dramatic increase in sepsis after the statewide abortion. All of the data is here. There is a note here on the limitations of this study. They don't account for changes in healthcare outside of hospitals. There's no way to account for that data. But this is still generally accurate data. All studies have limitations. Then we have pregnancy-associated hospital deaths. We found 120 women who died while hospitalized during pregnancy or up to 6 weeks postpartum in 2022 and 2023 to the inpatient billing data. The Texas Maternal Mortality Morbidity Review Committee will not review deaths from these years, stating that they will skip to 2024 in order to get a more contemporary view of deaths, a choice that faced widespread criticism. To identify inpatient deaths in the Texas hospital discharge data, we included all results with a patient status of expired with a diagnosis or procedure code indicating that the patient was pregnant or up to 6 weeks postpartum. with a specific postpartum complication based on identifying pregnant and postpartum Medicaid and CHIP beneficiaries. Cool. Let's go ahead and see what their findings were. They got an area on missing documents. All right, cool. Interesting. Our count of inpatient deaths does not attempt to determine what role a person's pregnancy or the state abortions ban played in their deaths. That type of analysis would require access to medical records. Our tally would include, for example, a person who was hospitalized after a car crash, but who also got pregnant. Experts advised us to leave these cases in because without further investigation by the Maternal Mortality Committee, it's impossible to know, for example, if there was any relationship between their pregnancy and the cause of the accident, for instance, or if there were any delays in maternal care after the accident. So while it may be easy to intuit, oh, the car crash killed them, it's not easy to intuit that sometimes there is a complication in the pregnancy that led to the car crash. Say water broke in the middle of driving and that caused your brain to lapse for a very quick moment, and now suddenly the car has done a quick swivel. ProPublica then found that deaths did in fact increase sharply during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic and peaked in 2021, and that many cases in 2020 and afterwards included COVID-19 diagnostic codes. More than 60% of the deaths that we analyzed had a diagnosis of COVID in 2021, and 27% had a diagnosis in 2022. The COVID-19 diagnostic code was not introduced until 2020, several months after the pandemic began. In October of 2020, it was updated in January 2021. The coding changes, combined with changes in hospital protocols around identifying COVID cases, make it impossible to filter out all the COVID-19 related deaths during the time period. With all of this in mind, between 2019 and 2023, there was a 33% increase in maternal mortality rate in Texas, compared with a decrease of 7.5% nationally during the same time, which means that the harder the abortion ban, the stricter the abortion ban, the higher the mortality rate. But it should be noted that unlike the sepsis information where we were able to get full billing data, we don't have all the data for the mortality rate. COVID could have played a factor in a lot of these as well. This one is not the home run that it may look like it is on first viewing. Well, a home run, if your goal is to convince people that maybe women having access to their own bodies is a good thing. It's not the home run there that you may once think. It does, however, show an increase, and I would hope that eventually ProPublica would be able to get access to this data in full to see exactly what kind of increase we had and what individual deaths would need to be investigated in order to determine how many of these were as a direct cause or were directly caused by the bans. And that does it for everything. Texas banned abortion, and then the rates of sepsis soared in Texas. The mortality rate also went up by 33%, but it's very hard to pin that down on any one thing in particular. So what is the point of all this? Well, the point of all this is to give you a resource. ProPublica is a very, very reliable reporting agency, and you can use stuff like this when you are encountering somebody who is willing to have their mind changed by data. Now, oftentimes, like I said, you are going to be dealing with somebody who does not want their mind to be changed by data. And when that happens, please rely on the Socratic method. And if that fails, remember, you are not personally responsible for changing the mind of a single individual, for making them a better critical thinker. You are not responsible for that. That is a them journey. All your job is is to be as good a vehicle as possible in leading that horse to water. Whether that horse drinks the water is completely up to them. But be as least abrasive as you can be as informative as you can be as understanding as you can be, because right now the left needs allies. The left broadly needs liberal allies. But the left and liberals broadly need centrist allies. And the left, liberals, and centrists broadly need allies that are willing to move over from their conservative positions when they realize that those positions are kind of full of horse crap. Unfortunately, getting people to move, especially with our Overton window shifted as far right as it is a hard thing to do. Also, Jelly Bean Boys, thank you very much for resubscribing. I appreciate it. It is not an easy task, but if you've got the spoons for it, then it's a good idea to start sharpening up your rhetoric, sharpening up your arguments, having data on your side. That way, if you are in a data-driven argument, you have the data to fight. While also recognizing when you are in a data-driven argument versus when you are in an argument that really is only going to be won by the other person thinking really hard to themselves. Wingcaster says, if I don't have data with me, can I use Spock? Yes, you can. His logic will likely help you a ton. Smacko says, I've said it before, but the left acts too much like a social group that wants to be exclusive than a political group that wants to win. Yeah, it's true. We do. And we eat our own far too often. My aim in 2025 with this channel is to try to get more people to recognize how to get people to talk to them about these issues and move their perspectives, however slowly, away from the extremist right shit that we've been plagued with for the last, well, far too many years. Way, way too many years. So, that all said, let me know what y'all think in the comment section below. Let me know if you've had any success having these conversations with people as well. I would really, really like to know if any of you have had some of these fun conversations. And really quick, just another quick thing. If you are here at the end of the video, if you are not currently here watching live, like these 99 wonderful people are, then Monday through Thursday, there are streams over on YouTube and Twitch, youtube.com/SurisLive and twitch.com/NecoSuris. Obviously, I would love you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. There's a playmat you can get for playing with my character over at your local LGS. If you would like, please consider supporting me over on Patreon as well. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And I also have a Magic the Gathering channel, youtube.com/SurisMTG, where I upload content usually Monday through Friday. That all said, thank you all for watching, and as always, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.